Little background on Mike Pence. He's Donald Trump's pick for vice president, so if Trump wins, we'll have this jagoff in office right beside him. He took money from the tobacco lobby and gave a famous speech about how tobacco wasn't harmful for you. He says it's all propaganda to kill the tobacco industry. He's been called a tobacco truther. So let's hear what this genius has to say for himself.
Mr. Speaker, I've always been interested in origins. Even though my training is in the law and in history, it has ever been an avocation of mine to contemplate and to study the origins of man and of life here on Earth.
Did you get a linguist or a 5-year-old to teach you those big words? So you're an armchair philosopher. And we already know you start from your conclusion, God created the universe, and work backward from there. Let's keep going.
And many theories of origins have been propounded throughout our nation's history. 1859, a sincere biologist returned from the Galapagos Islands and wrote a book entitled The Origins of Species, in which Charles Darwin, offered a theory of the origin of species, which we've come to know as evolution.
I could be wrong here, but I don't think it was considered a theory at the time. I just want to tear this down from the beginning. He's going to say the word theory an awful lot throughout this video. So let's get the definition of theory. Here it is. A well-substantiated explanation of some aspect of the natural world, based on a body of facts that have been repeatedly confirmed through observation and experiment. In a scientific setting, the word theory means something completely different than it does in a colloquial setting. He's confusing the two definitions, which just shows how little science education he's actually had.
Charles Darwin never thought of evolution as anything other than a theory. He hoped that someday it would be proven by the fossil record.
Source, please? That's right, it's a tested and verified theory. Apparently people don't know what the scientific method is. Let me explain it so there isn't any confusion. I'll explain it just as I did to my kid when she was 6. Let's say you've noticed that it's always cloudy when it rains. You're trying to figure out how the two things are related. Let's make a list of hypotheses, and then we can cross out the bad ones. 1. The clouds are people that dump big buckets of water on our heads. 2. The clouds are gods that are angry with us, and they're throwing down lightning bolts and crying. 3. The clouds are actually full of water, and when that water gets close enough together, it condenses and turns into raindrops. Now that we have our hypotheses, we'll cross out the bad ones and test the good ones. Before it can be considered a theory, it has to give an accurate description of the world, and it has to be falsifiable. We have to be able to prove the hypothesis wrong and have it pass that test before it can become a theory. It must be descriptive. Once it graduates to a theory, which is what every idea strives to be, you can derive laws from it. The germ theory of disease describes what germs are and how they transmit disease. The theory of gravity describes gravity and how it works, and the law of gravity says that things will gather closer together. Laws are commonly in mathematical form.
But did not live to see that, nor have we. 1925, in the famous Scopes monkey trial, this theory made its way through litigation into the classrooms of America, and we all have seen the consequence over the last 77 years.
It must be really convincing to have convinced a judge, and I'm sure a plethora of others. Just from the things you're saying here, I can tell that you have no clue how evolution works. It boggles my mind. But the fact is that teachers in American public schools avoid evolution at all costs. I didn't learn what evolution actually was until I was already out of high school and researching it on my own.
Evolution not taught as a sincere theory of biologists, but rather, Mr. Speaker, taught as fact.
Actually, it should be called the theory of the fact of evolution. Evolution has been proven without a shadow of a doubt since the discovery of DNA, since the sequencing of the genome, and particularly since a study that was started in the 1980s on E. coli bacteria that allowed scientists to actually observe evolution taking place. Link to the study is in the description.
And lest anyone listening in would doubt that, we can all see in our mind's eye that grade room classroom we all grew up in with the linear depiction of evolution just above the chalkboard. There's the little monkey crawling on the grass. There's the Neanderthal with his knuckles dragging, and then there's Mel Gibson standing in all of his glory. It is what we have been taught.
So much wrong with everything he just said. First of all, we didn't evolve from Neanderthals. They were our close cousins. We lived alongside them. Also, their knuckles didn't drag. They walked upright. We didn't come from monkeys. Another argument put forward by ignorant idiots that have no idea what they're talking about. And I never had one of those in my classrooms, but I suspect Mel Gibson wasn't on yours either.
That man proceeded and evolved along linear lines. But now comes a new find by paleontologists in the newspapers all across America. A new study in Nature magazine. 6 to 7 million year old skull has been unearthed, the Torme skull, and it suggests that human evolution was actually, according to a new theory,
Probably more accurate to say that this is a hypothesis, not a theory. And it's most likely an addition to evolutionary theory, unless it describes something completely unrelated. Because evolution has the market cornered. It would be world-changing to find that evolution wasn't a fact. There's so much evidence for it that I would go so far as to say that the fact of evolution won't ever be disproven. It can be changed, even heavily modified, but we know for a fact that evolution is just the nature of the universe. That is how things work. We have witnessed it with our own eyes, as evidenced by the study cited in my description.
human evolution was taking place, and I'm quoting now, all across Africa and on the earth. And the earth was once truly, and I quote, a planet of the apes on which nature was experimenting with many human-like creatures. Paleontologists are excited about this, Mr. Speaker, but no one's pointing out that the textbooks, I guess, will need to be changed.
Calm down there, Kermit the Frog. Aren't the textbooks supposed to be changed every year or two anyways? Just about every textbook they use in school has new editions every so often. And unlike your primitive 1500-year-old book, the Bible, and yes, I mean 1500-year-old book, things need to change as new facts come in. I'm sorry that you don't want to change the textbooks as we make scientific discoveries, but you can shove it up your ass. That's the cost of having an educated population.
Because the old theory of evolution, taught for 77 years in the classrooms of America as fact, is suddenly replaced by a new theory, or I hasten to add, I'm sure we'll be told, a new fact.
Straw man. No, it wasn't replaced. Absolutes are unscientific, so I hate to deal in absolutes. But as I said, we've observed evolution with our own eyes. We know for a fact that evolution is a real, natural process. It will never be replaced. And what you've presented as its replacement doesn't describe anything. It just gives an off-the-cuff remark about how nature was experimenting with apes for hundreds of thousands of years.
Well, the truth is, it always was a theory, Mr. Speaker. And now that we've recognized evolution as a theory, I would simply and humbly ask, can we teach it as such?
That's right. It's a scientific theory. Very good. And I would love it if it was taught as the scientific theory that it is. Unfortunately, it's demonized by most teachers. At best, they'll give one short little segment about it and move on. I had human anatomy and physiology in high school, and somehow I was never taught about evolution.
And can we also consider teaching other theories of the origin of species, like the theory that was believed in by every signer of the Declaration of Independence? Every signer of the Declaration of Independence believed that men and women were created and were endowed by that same creator.
Hold up, I disagree. Haven't you ever heard of Jefferson's Bible? Thomas Jefferson went through the Bible and cut out every verse that was mystical and ridiculous. Needless to say, he wasn't left with much afterward. And at that time, just about everybody was a deist at best, because there was no other explanation for how we got here. It was just taken for granted that God created us. But then we discovered evolution. We realized that we were all indirectly related to every living thing around us. As science progressed, there was less and less need for God. Disproving evolution doesn't mean God did it. It just means that we don't know how we got all the different species we have today. Religion is on the defensive here, not us. But I'll let that slide since you're quoting straight from the Declaration of Independence.
With certain unalienable rights. The Bible tells us that God created man in his own image, male and female, he created them. And I believe that.
I'm sorry, I didn't know Trump picked a mentally retarded running mate. Now I do.
Mr. Speaker, I believe that God created the known universe, the earth, and everything in it, including man. And I also believe that someday scientists will come to see that only the theory of intelligent design.
Oh, come on. The quote-unquote theory of intelligent design? Look, you're the one tearing down the word theory here. You have to know this is ridiculous. I've torn ID apart in other videos, and I'm not going to do it here. I'll just say that there's no evidence showing that intelligent life can create life from nothing. So you have an uphill battle to prove God created humans.
The theory of intelligent design provides even a remotely rational explanation for the known universe. But until that day comes, and I have no fear of science.
Until the day comes that you have no fear of science, I think we have a long wait ahead of us. I'm sorry, I know that was dishonest. I just couldn't pass up the chance to do a little quote mining on this tobacco truther. Let's hear it in context.
That day comes, and I have no fear of science. I believe that the more we study the science, the more the truths of faith will become apparent. I just would humbly ask, as new theories of evolution find their ways into the newspapers and into the textbooks, let us demand that educators around America teach evolution not as fact, but as theory.
Like I said, it's the theory of the fact of evolution. It describes how the fact of evolution acts on populations over time.
And an interesting theory to boot.
Apparently not interesting enough to encourage you to learn the first thing about it before going to the floor of Congress.
But let's also bring into the minds of all of our children all of the theories about the unknowable that some bright day in the future, through science and perhaps through faith, we will find the truth of from whence we come. And I yield back.
No, I don't want my kid learning about every stupid thing that pops into your head. I don't want her learning about every colloquial theory that you want to push on her. This is what the Republican Party has to offer here in America. This is the dogma to which you have to subscribe when you become a Republican politician. If you aren't a religious zealot, you don't get elected because you have to pander to the evangelicals. Democrats don't claim evolution is a lie, they usually just don't talk about it. Although there have been Democrats that were anti-evolution and anti-science. But the Conservative Party here is inextricably linked with religion, and I will vote against anybody that purports to disbelieve evolution and other basic scientific facts. This is a classic correlation does not equal causation fallacy. There are very few, if any, countries that are secular and have been secular since the beginning. They all started out as predominant